Thank you for the kind introduction and welcome to our presentation, which dives into the question of how an urban digital twin, which is embedded in a stakeholder participation format, can address or also even not address challenges in current urban heat transitions. And we will provide some insights in our current case study on which we work together with our colleagues Christian Leon and Cordula Kropp. So we will first provide some background on our research and on our approach, and then we will introduce the case study we work on right now and describe the methods we used, and finally present our first findings and also discuss their implications and reflect on how our approach can tackle challenges in urban heat transition. So a key part to achieve greenhouse gas neutrality is the decarbonization of the heating sector. And unlike electricity or fuels, thermal energy cannot be transported over longer distances without significant losses. And that's why solutions in this case must be rather location specific and also adapted to existing infrastructures. And cities today focus mainly on 3 strategies, and this is making buildings more energy efficient by energy refurbishment, expanding district heating networks, and also installing renewable electricity powered heating systems like heat pumps, for example. And we see that the decarbonized future local energy system will rely stronger on a link between the heat and the power and also the mobility sectors. And that's why a diverse range of actors and measures is involved. And often we see arising conflicts over the right strategies, the right goals. There's also a lack of adaptation between the technical solutions and the social conditions in which people live in, which all then together lead to a general lack of adaptation. And this raises the question of how to bring the necessary or relevant actors at the local level together, such as, for example, local authorities, the grid operators, energy suppliers, but also the homeowners and tenants in order to tackle this coordination problem. And our solution for this problem is a participatory planning format, which is supported by an urban digital twin. And we have heard a lot about the challenges of digital twins already, and such tools are increasingly used in energy system planning right now, but their effectiveness is still uncertain. So it remains unclear whether digital twins really promote collaborative planning and whether they are really designed to meet the real needs of stakeholders. And often they risk oversimplifying urban complexity by focusing too much on the technical indicators and overlooking the important social aspects. And when it comes to participation, there are also some challenges. So often stakeholders lack the necessary knowledge and skills to really engage in discussions. And that often leads to difficulties in understanding each other's perspectives. And also they may have some preset biases, experiences that hinder decision making. And to ensure successful deliberation that really includes all those viewpoints, facilitation is very important. And we believe that combining a digital twin with a stakeholder dialogue can help to address those challenges, as Nils will now further carry out.
Yes, as Franziska just presented, we see great potential in combining a co-designed UDT with a participation process to facilitate local energy transitions. So our approach is therefore comprised of an urban digital twin as a model-based virtual representation of a district energy system, which can simulate possible transformation pathways towards sustainability using mathematical optimization. And the UDT also incorporates social elements such as ownership relations of buildings. The modeled energy system is visualized in a 3D city model in our project, also allowing interactive and immersive representations in a cave. You can see such a cave now on the left side of the slide, and this immersive room allows stakeholders to experience and evaluate the impact of planned changes in virtual reality. So the installations of solar panels on roofs or energy efficiency measures can be experienced. This experiential approach complements other visualizations we use like charts and maps. Complementing the UDT, our approach also consists of a participation process or a social science approach. And this process starts with a stakeholder analysis to understand local transition challenges and to inform the development of the urban digital twin, following a co-design approach. Next, the stakeholders participate in a dialogue process consisting of several workshops. Here they discuss goals and preferences regarding the future energy system and decide on a transformation pathway. During this dialogue, the digital twin serves as a knowledge base to support the deliberation of the problems at hand to fill out the skill gaps that Franziska addressed. And at the same time, the new aspects and questions that come up during the dialogues are also fed back into the digital twin or the development of the digital twin, again following a co-design approach. In our presentation today now, we want to focus on the following research question regarding our approach. What are potentials and limitations of our approach to address the current barriers and conflicts in the sustainable energy transition of urban districts? To answer this question, we looked at an empirical case study. And this empirical case study is the campus Vaihingen of the University of Stuttgart, so pretty much our place, which you can see here on the map. And it is an integral part of the further residential area Vaihingen-Stuttgart. And the energy consumption of the campus is equivalent to a medium-sized city of around 50,000 inhabitants and has a diverse building stock in regards to usage and ownership. Most of the buildings of the campus are of course used by the university for teaching and research, but there are also housing units as well as non-university buildings such as a police department or a school, as you can see on the map. Looking at the energy system or the energy supply system, all of the heat and part of the electricity is currently provided by a gas-powered cogeneration power plant, which you can see up there right in the corner. And this heat from the power plant is distributed by an existing district heating network, which you can see marked in red on the map. The decarbonization of this heating network is the main challenge for the university's goal of carbon neutrality until 2030. This can be partially achieved through the planned use of waste heat from the supercomputer at the High Performance Computing Center Stuttgart, planned for 2027. You can see the computing center down here. But a comprehensive decarbonization plan is still lacking and up for debate. So now, how did we approach to answer our research question for today? By applying a stakeholder analysis procedure, we identified relevant stakeholders of the campus through desk research. We then conducted guideline-based interviews with them on their preferences, conflicts, and barriers regarding the local energy system. Through inductive coding of the interview protocols, we identified, clustered, and analyzed occurring barriers to the local energy transformation. These identified barriers are now used to inform the further development of our urban digital twin, as well as to examine the potentials and limits of our approach in addressing these barriers, as Franziska will now present to you.
So you can see here now the stakeholders in our case study that we identified as relevant and with whom we have conducted separate interviews. And the most important we want to emphasize here is the separation between the ownership and operation of the building. So on the left side in green, we have the University Building Agency who owns most of the buildings on campus and is also responsible for their renovation and construction, which is funded by the State Ministry of Finance. And on the right side, you see the University of Stuttgart, which is the primary tenant and user of the buildings and has no, or at least little, decision-making power over construction, but it operates the buildings and the energy systems with the different departments that are depicted here. So what is holding back the heat transition on campus? By inductive coding of our interviews, we could identify around 25 key barriers. which are depicted here. I won't go into detail of this because of time reasons, but what we did with those barriers is we categorized them based on whether they could be addressed by the digital twin, by the stakeholder dialogue, or by a combination of both. And we tried to identify a solution pattern. And our findings suggest that there are different approaches depending on the nature of the barrier we see here. And here we will show you the hypothetical concept that we derived from our analysis. So the left-hand circle in gray represents what we called organizational and behavioral barriers, where we think that the stakeholder dialogue may be the most effective solution to tackle those, because those are challenges which all require some form of raising awareness for problems, negotiation between stakeholders, and also the clarification of responsibilities. And therefore, we think a direct interaction between stakeholders in a dialogue is necessary. Then in the right circle in blue, we identified a group of barriers which deals with rather technical and data-related questions, and which may rather be resolved by a digital twin alone. And in these cases, we think that data-driven analysis, simulations, optimization might play a key role to tackle those questions. And then we also identified a third group, which is represented by the intersection of both circles in between, which includes barriers that are both social and technical. So the interaction between humans and technology is key here. And those are cases where either technical challenges require some form of organizational decisions, or where organizational problems can only be solved if decision makers have access to a strong technical data foundation. And therefore, we think that those barriers may require both tools to work together in order to be tackled. So the digital twin here would provide the necessary data to support stakeholder dialogue, while the dialogue then itself ensures that the data really leads to actual behavioral change and to concrete actions. And finally, at the bottom, in black, there's a group of what we called external barriers, such as, for example, the gas crisis due to the war in Ukraine, or also bureaucratic hurdles at higher state levels, or also the lack of skilled staff, for example. And those factors are largely beyond the control of our stakeholders in our case study. And for them, we suggest that there must be rather an external policy support or bigger policy changes in order to be tackled. And that's why we won't consider them further here. So this has been quite abstract so far, but we will now present some concrete examples from each of these barrier groups to make it a little bit clearer, hopefully. So one mentioned organizational barrier was the lack of coordination between stakeholders. And the stakeholders described this to us as a lack of a coordinating and responsible body within the university, so that the current measures that are done at the university right now in terms of sustainability run in parallel and are not well integrated. And in this case, our urban digital twin could foster coordination and maybe reduce parallel measures by integrating the technical processes into one common model of the energy system. And also, for example, an organizational chart could be included to make the current ownership structures transparent, and also building usage and responsibilities. But we think that the digital twin is also limited because it cannot really guarantee that all responsibilities are really defined and that the measures are really actively coordinated. And that's why we think there must be a stakeholder dialogue which acts as a platform for stakeholder coordination and for pooling the existing activities. And by coming together in dialogue workshops, stakeholders could jointly determine future measures. They could determine timeframes, responsibilities, and this coordination is in our case especially important between the university building agency, who owns the buildings, and the university as operator of the system. So overall, we think that this organizational barrier can well be addressed by the dialogue, and the digital twin is thereby not a really necessary condition, but it can also be supportive. Now, when it comes to the technical barriers, it was mentioned the obstacle of technical complexity of the energy system at the university campus. It is seen as complex because different heat generators, like for example, the power plant, as you have seen before, and the computing center must be coordinated to reach the right flow temperatures in the heating network. And there are also heterogeneous buildings and high peak load demands of large-scale research plants, which makes it really complex to decarbonize the heating system. And in this context, we also observed goal conflicts among stakeholders. So there are stakeholders who think that the power plant can't be easily replaced in the future because it is seen as important for the security of supply. And there are stakeholders who think, no, it's the opposite. We can replace it by other energy providers, like, for example, huge heat pumps. So there are different understandings about how the current energy system works and how it might work in the future. And to tackle this barrier, we suggest a strong potential for our urban digital twin. So it could, for example, simulate heat generation and operation, could simulate the temperatures in the heating network and also the peak loads for research plans. And it could also map the buildings and their heat consumption to deduce the energy saving potentials. So by showing the data for developing a shared understanding, we think that this digital twin could have a strong potential. And for the dialogue in this case, we would suggest a rather smaller potential. So it can lead that the needs of the users of existing systems are taken into account. It can be a platform to discuss necessary measures, but the dialogue is limited because without data, the discussion remains rather abstract, and also the technical feasibility of possible transformation pathways can't be validated without the right models. So in the end, the barrier of technical complexity can well be addressed by our approach due to the digital twin alone. So this means the digital twin is a necessary and also a sufficient condition in this case, and the dialogue can probably also support it.
So next, let's look at an example for an internal socio-technical barrier. Thank you. Lack of strategy. So there's no shared goal or overarching concept for a climate neutral energy supply on the campus. And to tackle this, a digital twin can provide a data-driven foundation for strategy development by modeling the existing energy infrastructure and visualizing renewable potentials like solar power or waste heat. It enables simulations of different energy supply concepts. And this includes assessing refurbishment measures, renewable energy investments, and also forecasting costs, energy savings, and emissions. All of this helps to prioritize investments based on different goals. However, a digital twin cannot take over the decision of which strategy in the end should be pursued and which concrete measures should be prioritized, especially when also considering financial, social, or political framework conditions. This is exactly where a stakeholder dialogue shows its potential, and through open discussion between stakeholders, goals and priorities can be clarified, competing interests balanced, and a shared strategy developed. Also, roles and responsibilities can be allocated more clearly, which facilitates planning and implementation. And when all relevant stakeholders are involved to develop the strategy, there may also be a greater commitment by them to the strategy itself. However, also the dialogue has its limits. Without a data-driven insights, decisions lack a solid foundation, and without visualizations, stakeholders are not empowered to participate accordingly. So a lack of strategy can be well addressed by our approach due to the combined use of the digital twin in a dialogue process. But neither the digital twin or the dialogue alone are a sufficient method to overcome the barrier. A combination is needed. And due to time reasons, I will skip the external barriers, but just will say in short that we don't see a potential in our approach to address these barriers we identified there. So in conclusion, our analysis shows that In general, a co-designed urban digital twin can theoretically address the technical and data-driven barriers we identified in our case study. On the other hand, a dialogue process that includes all relevant stakeholders can theoretically overcome the organizational and behavioral barriers. For the socio-technical barriers, only a combined approach of using a UDT in a dialogue process has the potential to overcome the barriers. Looking at the limitations of our approach, a significant group of external barriers, as we mentioned before, remains that can't be addressed. Due to their structural, political, or external nature, they lie beyond the direct influence of local stakeholders. In order to address some of these, district energy planning would have to be extended to a multi-level approach that goes beyond this district or city level. Additionally, much of the potential of the UDT is dependent on the quality of input data and model assumptions. And in our experience in the project, the basis and model assumptions often have gaps and are uncertain. Furthermore, many barriers require a detailed level of modeling, and this can be very challenging due to missing data or very labor-intensive modeling. And in both cases, only a transparent, coherent, and co-designed development can ensure adequate modeling, where the stakeholders also accept the results of the modeling despite any methodological shortcomings. So, in final conclusion, we understand our urban digital twin as a diagnostic tool that can identify issues and propose technical solutions. But real change requires shifts at the behavioral and organizational levels, which need to be decided on in a dialogue process. Reflecting on our findings, we believe that modeling and stakeholder-friendly visualization are key to facilitate sustainable district energy transitions, but we are also questioning whether visualizing the urban digital twin in a cave, like in our project, is truly necessary. Simpler visualizations may as well do the job for a lot of the identified barriers. So one of our research tasks in the upcoming dialogue process and mock-up testing this summer at the university campus is to gather more empirical evidence on this question. So thank you for your attention, and we are now looking forward to the discussion with you.